The room smelled like my grandmother's perfume, and I couldn't decide if that made it worse. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had asked my manager for the morning off and she'd looked at me like I was asking for something unreasonable, and I'd had to say the words out loud. My grandmother passed away, and watch her face rearrange itself into something that looked like sympathy but wasn't quite. I drove 40 minutes to the law office on Meridian Street with a travel mug of coffee that had gone cold before I even hit the highway. My brother was already there when I arrived. He was standing outside with his wife and they were laughing about something. Not a nervous laugh, not a we're grieving and sometimes you laugh kind of laugh, a real one. The kind you let out when everything is going exactly the way you planned. I should have known then. I'm the kind of person who notices things and then talks herself out of them. I've been doing it my whole life. My name is June, I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed CPA, which means I spend my days making sure other people's numbers tell the truth. I'm good at my job. I've been good at my job since I was 24 and landed my first position at an accounting firm downtown. The kind of firm where you eat lunch at your desk and consider that a personality. I mention this not to brag, but because it matters later. It always matters later. My grandmother. I called her Gran, raised gardenias on her back porch and kept a recipe box full of index cards written in handwriting so small you needed reading glasses even if your vision was perfect. She made the best biscuits I have ever eaten. She called me every Sunday at 7 in the evening, without fail, for the last 11 years. Even when she couldn't remember what day it was near the end, she would still reach for the phone on Sundays and ask for me. She did not call my brother on Sundays. I don't think he knows that. My brother's name is Travis. He is 4 years older than me and has always carried himself like someone who got to the party first and wants everyone to know it. His wife, Kelsey, is pleasant the way certain hotel lobbies are pleasant, designed to make you feel welcome without actually making you feel anything. They have 2 kids I see at Christmas and birthdays, and even then only for a few hours. Growing up, my brother was the one who could do no wrong. He played baseball in high school. He went to state. My parents have a photo of him from that season hanging in the hallway of their house, right at eye level, right where you see it first when you walk in. My school photos are somewhere in a drawer, I think. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I used to. Now I say it like a fact. The way you note that a road has a pothole, you just learn to drive around it. Gran's house was a craftsman bungalow in a neighborhood that used to be working class and was now being described in real estate listings as charming and up and coming. She had lived there for 53 years. She had painted the front door red herself in 1987 and repainted it herself every few years until her hands made that too difficult. Then I repainted it for her. We did it on a Saturday in October, 2 years before she died. She sat in a lawn chair and supervised and told me I was using too much pressure on the brush. She wasn't wrong. Gran was not a wealthy woman in the way people use that word when they're trying to impress someone. But she had been careful. She had been deliberate. She had owned that house free and clear since the late 90s, and she had a portfolio of index funds that her financial advisor, a quiet man named Gerald, who she had trusted for decades, had helped her build slowly, consistently, without drama. She never talked about money directly. That wasn't her way. But sometimes, when we were sitting on her porch in the evenings, she would say things like, "A woman should always know where her money is, June." Or, "You can be generous and still be smart." Those aren't opposites. I filed those things away without fully understanding why. She died in February. Cardiac event. She went fast, which her doctor said was a mercy, and I believe them. But I also think that word mercy is sometimes used to make the living feel better about something that just hurts. The service was small. She had wanted it that way. I gave the eulogy. Travis did not offer. 2 weeks after the burial, Gerald's office sent letters to the relevant parties requesting our presence for the leading of the estate. The letter was formal and used words like beneficiary and fiduciary and distribution of assets, and I read mine 3 times standing at my kitchen counter. That was the first time I let myself think, maybe she left me something. I pushed the thought away. I had learned a long time ago not to expect much from my family's version of fairness. The conference room had a long table and chairs with armrests and a window that looked out onto a parking garage. Daryl's associate, a woman named Patricia who wore her hair pulled back tightly and spoke with the careful precision of someone who had seen many families fall apart in this exact room, offered us water when we sat down. My parents took water. Travis and Kelsey took water. I took water and held the cup with both hands because the air conditioning was aggressive and I had forgotten a jacket. My parents sat across from me. My mother had dressed up, which told me something. She was wearing the earrings she saves for occasions she considers significant. My father had his jacket torn and his shoulders back. Travis had his arm around Kelsey's chair, casual, proprietarily, like a man who is already mentally moved into a house he hasn't been offered yet. Patricia opened a manila folder. I looked at the window, at the parking garage, at the grey concrete levels stacked on top of each other. I thought about Glan's red front door. The estate, Patricia explained, had been organized into two components. The first was a straightforward bequest of personal property, furniture, the recipe box, jewelry, household items to be divided among family members according to a handwritten list Gran had provided. Travis got the grandfather clock from the living room. My parents got the china. I got the recipe box and a small watercolor painting of the Oregon coast that had hung in Glan's bedroom for as long as I could remember. My mother smiled when my parents' items were read aloud. Not at me, just smiled. Into the room. Then Patricia turned a page. The second component, she said, involved the financial assets and the property at 4412 Elmwood Drive, Glan's house, along with its contents and the equity therein, and the investment portfolio maintained to Gerald's firm, which at the time of death had a total value of approximately, she said, a number. My brother's wife made a sound. Not a word, just a sound, low and satisfied, like something confirming itself. I kept my eyes on Patricia, and the entirety of this component, Patricia continued, has been left to June. The room did not go silent the way rooms do in movies. It went a different kind of quiet, the kind where everyone is still making small sounds, a chair shifting, a breath, a cup set down. But these sounds are happening inside a vacuum. My mother said, "What?" Patricia looked at her with the expression of someone who has been trained to remain neutral in situations that are not neutral. She said that the document was clear and that she could read the relevant section again if that would be helpful. My father said my brother's name. Just his name. Like a question. Travis was staring at the table. I was staring at Patricia because I did not trust myself to look at anyone else, and Patricia was the only person in that room who was not currently rearranging her entire understanding of the last several decades. Then Patricia said, "There is also a letter. Your grandmother asked that it be read aloud." She unfolded 2 pages of Gran's small, dense handwriting. Someone had transcribed it, but Patricia held the original, and I could see even from across the table that the paper had the slightly soft quality of something that had been handled many times before it was sealed. Patricia read. Gran wrote the way she talked, directly, without a lot of decoration but with a precision that could sometimes feel like a blade. She said that she had spent a long time thinking about what it meant to leave something behind, and that she had concluded it was not simply about giving people things they wanted, but about giving the right things to the right people. She wrote that Travis was her grandson, and she loved him. That was not in question, and would never be, but she had watched over the years how easily he moved through a world that moved easily for him, and she had observed that easy movement had made him careless with people he did not need to be careful with. She wrote that she had watched how her granddaughter June had been treated in this family, that she had said things about it quietly to the people who needed to hear them, and those things had not been heard, that she had decided, therefore, to say it in the only language she had left available to her. She wrote that the house on Elmwood Drive had a garden on the south side and the best light in the afternoon through the kitchen window, and that she hoped I would sit in that light sometimes and think of her. She wrote, June always showed up. That is not a small thing. Most people do not understand how rare it is until it stops. My mother made a noise I had not heard from her before. It was not crying exactly. It was something adjacent to it. I was not going to cry in that room. I had decided this before I walked in, for different reasons than turned out to be necessary, but the decision held. Travis said, "This isn't." She wasn't in her right mind at the end. Patricia said, without looking up, that the document had been executed 14 months before the death, at a time when Gran's physician had provided written confirmation of her cognitive capacity, and that if he had concerns about the validity of the will, he was welcome to consult with an attorney. Kelsey put her hand on Travis's arm. My father looked at me for the first time since Patricia had said my name. His expression was complicated in a way I didn't have words for yet. I'm still not sure I do. I picked up my water cup. It was still cold. I held it and I looked at my father and I didn't say anything because there was nothing to say that the room hadn't already said. Patricia gave me a copy of the documents to take with me. She walked my family out with the careful courtesy of someone shepherding a situation toward its end. I stayed in the conference room for a few minutes after everyone left. I looked at the parking garage. I thought about the fact that Gran had written that letter 14 months ago, which meant she had been sitting with it, the decision, the words, for at least a year, maybe longer, deciding, making sure. She had been so quiet about it. She had just kept calling me on Sundays. I drove to Elmwood Drive that afternoon. I had a key. I had always had a key. The house smelled like her. That will fade and I know it and I'm not ready for it. The garden on the south side had things coming up through the soil. Early green shoots that didn't care about any of what had happened in a conference room on Meridian Street that morning. I stood at the kitchen window in the afternoon light and I thought about every Sunday phone call, every painted door, every biscuit, every porch evening where she said things I filed away. A woman should always know where her money is, June. She had known where all of it was. She had known exactly. I called Gerald the next day. We sat down the following week and went through everything: the portfolio, the accounts, the insurance policies, the property assessment. It was not complicated the way Gran was not complicated. Careful, deliberate. Every piece of it placed with intention. There was also a smaller account I hadn't known about, a savings account she'd had at a local credit union, separate from everything Gerald managed. It had a balance of just over $4,000. In the memo field of the most recent transaction, which she had made 3 weeks before she died, she had written for the red paint. I sat in Gerald's office and pressed my fingers against my eyes for a moment. Gerald looked at his desk. He was a kind man and he understood that some things require a minute. Travis called me twice in the 2 weeks after the reading. I let both calls go to voicemail. The messages were long and involved words like fairness and family and what Gran would have wanted, and I listened to them once each and then deleted them. What Gran would have wanted was documented, notarized, and on file with the county clerk's office. I didn't feel the need to debate it. My mother texted me. She said, "You have to understand this is hard for us." I read the text in my car, parked outside my apartment. I thought about all the things I might say. I thought about the earrings she had worn to the reading, chosen because the occasion felt significant to her. I thought about the hallway photo, the drawer where my school pictures lived. I put my phone in my bag and went inside. I'm not estranged from my family. I want to be clear about that. I see them. I was sitting at your lunch, Buzz and Muller for lunch, and at the events that families convene for, because that is the texture of family, even when it's complicated. But something has shifted in a way that I think is permanent, and I don't think that's entirely bad. It's just accurate. I know where things are now. I know where they are. The house is mine. I moved in on a Saturday in April, which would have been a few weeks after Gran's 98th batch of gardenias if she'd still been there to plant them. I bought new gardenia starts from a nursery and put them in along the south wall. I used too much pressure on the trowel, probably. There was no one in a lawn chair to correct me. I found the recipe box in one of the moving crates, took it into the kitchen and set it on the counter by the window where the afternoon light is best. Opened it up. The index cards were all there, the small handwriting, the particular smell of something kept carefully for a long time. The first card in the box was not a recipe. It was an index card in Gran's handwriting, and at the top she had written my name. Underneath it, she had written, I see you. I always have. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. G. I put the card back, closed the box, stood at the window in the afternoon light for a long time. Some things don't need a response, they just need to be received. Gran understood that. She understood a lot of things quietly and she trusted that I would too, and she was right. And that is the thing I keep coming back to. She was right. I keep thinking about the index card. The way it was sitting right there at the front of the box, like she had placed it last, like she wanted it to be the first thing I touched. Gran was not a dramatic person. She didn't make speeches. She didn't sit me down and tell me she loved me more than the others or that she saw what was happening and it wasn't fair. She just kept calling on Sundays, kept asking me to repaint the door, kept saying things on the porch that I filed away without knowing why. What I understand now is that she was building something, not a case, not an argument, just a record, quiet and consistent, of who showed up and who didn't. And she trusted that record to speak for itself when the time came. I think about my brother standing outside that law office, laughing before we even walked in. I don't think he's a bad person exactly. I think he's someone who was handed so much for so long that he stopped being able to imagine a room where the outcome didn't favor him. That's not cruelty. That's a particular kind of blindness. And it has consequences. And the consequences arrived on a Thursday morning in a conference room on Meridian Street. I'm not glad he was hurt. I want to be honest about that. There was nothing satisfying about watching his face when Patricia kept reading. It just felt accurate. The way a diagnosis feels accurate. You didn't want it to be true. But now that someone has named it, you can stop pretending it isn't. What Gran did took something. It took clarity, knowing her own mind well enough 14 months before she died to sit down with an attorney and put words to what she had observed over decades. That kind of clarity doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from paying attention, from thinking carefully about what is actually true versus what is comfortable to believe. She had spent her whole life doing that, and it showed up at the end in the most concrete way available to her. It also took courage. Quiet courage. The kind that doesn't announce itself. She knew that letter would be read aloud in a room with her son and daughter-in-law sitting right there. She wrote it anyway. She said what she meant in plain language and signed her name and let it stand. I don't think I fully understood until that Thursday what it costs a person to do that. And then there's the part I'm still sitting with, the part about endurance. I was sitting at work eating a sad granola bar for lunch. Eating a sad granola bar for lunch. The one whose photos lived in a drawer. The one who drove 40 minutes on a cold Thursday morning and still held it together in a room full of people who had never fully seen her. I kept showing up anyway, not because I expected it to be rewarded. I didn't. I showed up because Gran was worth showing up for, and because I had decided, somewhere along the way, that I wasn't going to become someone who stopped doing the right thing just because the right thing wasn't being noticed. Gran noticed. That's the thing I keep landing on. You don't always know who is paying attention. You don't always know what the record looks like from the outside. You just have to decide what kind of person you're going to be and then be that person consistently, even when it's quiet, even when no one seems to be keeping score. Someone is always keeping score. Sometimes it's the person sitting in a lawn chair telling you you're using too much pressure on the brush. I painted the front door last weekend. Same red, same brand she used. I still use too much pressure. But the door looks exactly right.